where not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out. From WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network, Friday Java, our magazine program of Boston Red here, from broadcasting from the Jerry Pippin Memorial broadcast booth. On our 4th of July presentation, Militarism on the Mall, we presented a Memorial Day episode from the late, great Jerry Pippin. We need to credit that correctly. He did the recording in 2011. Very interesting description that he gave. Jerry had the duty when serving in the military. He was one of the soldiers that took the dead troop back to their hometowns. And at that time, they went by rail. Rail was still the primary mode of transportation, at least from Oakland, California, to various other parts. And he would accompany the casket of the remains on to whatever town, village, or hamlet that it would be in. So that was what we were trying to present. A fourth that actually honored real people. The breathing, walking, and talking of people, and people that had been involved in defense of the country, no matter how dubious the situation was, such as in Vietnam. What took place on the National Mall on the 4th was a tragedy. It was not only a tragedy, it was nothing more than buffoonery. DJ Trump in the rain with a teleprompter talking about airplanes and the period of Paul Revere, and then saying he couldn't read the teleprompter. He had criticized various people, including President Obama, who could read a teleprompter, and Hillary Rodham Clinton. This is a typical pattern of many reactionary types. They criticize things that they know are not deficiencies to develop their persona above that person. In other words, what he was trying to convey to the American people was that the use of teleprompters by political politicians was something that was not needed. They could do oratory. Now remember, DJ Trump basic career was not speaking from a set speech or anything of that nature, but ad-libbing, and not only not ad-libbing, the type of reality type of shows that you see that is a skit, I'll call it. In other words, it's something that conveys whatever message, such as you are fired, etc. It's like professional wrestling. It's just play acting, and that sort of thing is a very low ebb of the debating craft. You'll find that many people, as a defense mechanism, this is not in his speech, but reactionaries, they'll say, would you please repeat it? Well, you repeat it. Or they'll say, for instance, asked you a question that is the most esoteric question that you could ever come up with. Such as I was talking to someone about autonomous automobiles, and this person pointed out a lithium-ion battery that exploded in a Tesla automobile. Well, yeah. I don't know right now how many automobiles that Tesla has produced and have on the road, but it's in hundreds of thousands. And that was one particular case. But Trump now has a situation with his so-called census question for 2020, are you a citizen? The Constitution mandates very clearly that every 10 years there must be a census and all persons must be counted. In other words, human beings. It does not talk about citizens, period of citizenship status. In 1950, they had a citizenship question. But you have to remember, in 1950, the whole idea of immigration was totally different. Immigration came from Europe and some from the former Soviet Union, and other nations had strict quotas. And most of the immigrants that were in the country were big groups, the Irish, and then, of course, you had people from Poland and various other enclaves, particularly out in the Midwest city of Chicago, that came in to work in the steel mills, the mines, etc. That would also extend to Pennsylvania, those kinds of outposts. But that in itself was a bit of an irregular situation, and in the country in 1950, Harry S. Truman was president, Gimel Harry, out of Kansas City, Missouri. And that was before I Like Ike, and it was after the war. The war ended officially in 1945, and the Korean War had started. I'll have to look up the precise circumstances around that citizenship question, but you were dealing with a totally different type of nation at the time. You also had an apartheid nation. The Supreme Court had not ruled in Brown v. Topeka. You did not have voting rights. You did not have rights for women. You did not have rights for LGBT community at all. So it was totally different. And as far as immigration from the southern borders were concerned, there was virtually none at that time. There was a guest workers program that came and went with Medico, but that was the extent of it. And if we look at the history of immigration up until this point, it was geared up for males coming from Medico, not for children and families. But now we have children and families that are coming from Guatemala, Honduras, etc., across the Americas. Totally different setup. And that is one of the problems that this administration is running against every day. There are literally hundreds of legal actions on a broad range of constitutional actions in the federal court systems. From the environmental situation in the Arctic wildlife, in the Upper Peninsula of Minnesota, and you name it, these lawsuits are going. Aboriginal tribes are suing for pipelines in Alaska, in the Arctic wilderness there, wildlife there. So all these things are going on at the same time. They're the central of the census question. The right to maintain concentration camps, spread bestiality by the Border Patrol Organization. We reported on it and just called it pure evil. We don't usually make any type of moral criteria, and we were not there. What we were using was language that people are familiar with across the country and across the world. Many people have talked about such things as Holocaust, etc. Well, what was happening to the children there, although they weren't being literally starved to death, they were working on it, forcing people to drink out of toilets, a subhuman, bestialic type of behavior, and very little is said about it around this buffoonery, talking about on the 4th, dishonored the 4th, no doubt about it, bringing in 70-ton tanks, and really didn't pay for it. And the crowd itself was disappointing. The water came out of, quote-unquote, the heavens, as some would say, and that was the background of it we had. We'll go now to the University of, well, not the University of Virginia, sorry about that, Larry Sabato and company, they're off. We'll go to the Vindicator. That is a daily newspaper, been around for a very long time, over 100 years, in Youngstown, Ohio. They will print their last edition on the 31st of August. Warren Buffett, during the Berkshire Hathaway meeting, was talking about newspapers and how they were toast. Now, it's a very interesting situation happening with local newspapers, particularly in places like Youngstown, working class newspapers. On the other end of the spectrum, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, they're doing well. Washington Post is adding investigative people, and various other outlets, NPR, and they are adding podcasts. In fact, we have coming up next week an episode called Podcasts and more podcasts. Just a sheer number of so-called podcasts that are being developed in a very agile format in what's happening in the space. Google now has what they call podcasts. It is nothing but internet radio, people. And you have out there iHeart, which is a radio station. They call themselves the #1 destination for podcasts. Thus, you have all of these outfits here. Spotify becoming very, very big in it. Some of the aggregators that you used to see in the space are less than before, such as Blueberry. We'll talk more about this. And Lipson, various others, because the podcasts are exploding. And this is what Jerry Pippin envisioned. At that time, internet radio was a radio. It originated from, like what Jerry was doing, radio stations or around radio stations, small powered stations like we had over 20 years ago. Didn't go very far. And then we came with the software to set up internet radio servers. It came out of an open source project affiliated with Real Network. Don't want to get too much into technical thing here now, but let's go to, let's see. We incidentally do have a Numbers Man program coming up here this week. We want to go to the Vindicator, the Vindy as they call it. Oops. Well, while we're roaming through here, we'll go out to Des Moines, Iowa. And Bernie was there in Des Moines, Iowa. Hopefully we can bring that up. But this was on the 4th of July. Bernie Sanders, being in his 70s, was out and about. We just happened to do it this way. Was out and about there, and he was able to visit several parades there while he was moving about, talking with people, and we're not bringing this up. Anyway, we'll just have to proceed as we normally would here. Let me skip along a little here. This is from NPR. On the Vindicator, or the Vindy as it is known. Is a newspaper that had been in business over 100 years. I believe 130 years. Located there in Youngstown. Used to be, you had, at the time, basic tire manufacturing and automotive center, as it was known at that particular time. And let me just check here and see if we can bring up the Vindy, the story of the Vindy here. We're probably going to have to do some sleight of hand here, we'll call it, to bring these stories up. But the Vindy, we heard the Vindy, story of the Vindy, I guess I should say, on NPR and also at the Newman site there, their particular site, and we'll see if we can by a hook or crook perhaps we're not going to have, because of technical difficulties here, bring up these stories. Hopefully we can. Let me just see if we can. We were going to Real Clear Politics here and get the current polling, but probably what we are going to do is some of these stories we will have on the week that was, and just continue on here with what do we have? We are bringing up the Washington Post here, hopefully. Sometimes on a Saturday, all kinds of Friday, all types of problems can appear, and they look like they're trying to appear today. For us, oops. Okay. Now, back to the citizenship question. We can run over it. There was a deadline today at 2 p.m. for the Trump administration to make a filing, but the filing is kind of a very, very unusual filing, to say the least. Basically, the government attorneys went in and said they were trying to come up with an answer, which doesn't make any sense at all here. So in other words, they really don't have an answer. They were given at 2 p.m. to tell the judge what they plan to do. They were not able to do that. Usually that is not the case. The census forms are being printed up, and we're just looking here. We'll go over several things. So that situation is just in limbo. That's all we can say about it. Joe Lunchbox Biden is becoming to look a bit strange here. This is on the 5th by Aaron Blake. He now has the Fix, the old Fix column. Evidently, Biden sat down for an interview with Chris Cuomo. He suggests he was surprised by the line of attack. We talked about the line of attack. This was from Kamala Harris. She's a senator from California. And that was what was known as the more of a Norman Rockwell moment. Norman Rockwell painted a very famous picture of the two little African American girls being led by a U.S. Marshal into Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. He also suggested, curiously, according to the report here by the Post, that he didn't think candidates should talk about each other's past and that the debate format doesn't suit him. That's very strange. I was, were you prepared for them? I was prepared for them to come after me, but I wasn't prepared for the person coming at me by the way she did. And he goes on to talk about knew his son, that was Bo, his late son. He was an attorney general in Delaware. But here's the deal. What I do know is that it's good and bad news. The American people think they know me, and they know me. Since that occurred, I have had the most sought-after endorsement from the mayor of Atlanta, an African-American woman, a great leader. Well, he's going to get those kinds of endorsements. There's not going to be a problem there. Biden's answer is a bit confusing, but he seemed to suggest that he wasn't exactly expecting Kamala Harris to come after him. It might indeed have been a harsher attack than some might have expected, but this was a subject that was ripe for Biden, no doubt about that. Senator Cory Booker, who also had a personal relationship with Biden, called him to apologize later. The second exchange raised eyebrows was the one that Biden offered a more extensive defense of busing there.
Why didn't you fight it like this in a debate? Well, anyway, it's ridiculous here. Joe Biden, I don't think they were irrelevant. They have been taken out of context. I mean, they know me. Well, maybe they do. It's easy to go back 30, 40, and 50 years and take it completely out of context. It wasn't taken out of context given the general theme of Trump's campaign, Make America Great Again, and that has been talked about numerous times, and that goes back to the 50s before actually Biden had come up. So this was Joe Biden. It doesn't make much sense, so we'll kind of move around it to here. Anyway, let's get back to that newspaper. This is the NPR story here. Hopefully we can get it up. If not it, maybe the Vindy. Yeah, we'll get it. It's an interesting op-ed written by one of the reporters at the Vindy. It's coming up now. This is the Vindicator out of Youngstown, Ohio. Well, that's the front page of the Vindy. And here we go. This is an opinion piece written on the 30th of June. The fuzzy photo you see here is not the greatest photo, but in some ways it is. The news that we are dealing with, the end of the Vindicator, is news that you all are dealing with too, including this Gerard gent in the photo. Friday with our night crew soldiering on to the Saturday paper printed. Some of the dayside crew headed out for a beer to digest the closure news that had been handed on the Bar TV, the local news that was still echoing the Vindicator's closure. To some at the bar, it was clear that who our group was. A gentleman born around, and from around the room he bellowed, "Thank you for what you have done for us." 6 of us nodded appreciatively and resumed our morning. An hour later, the gent came up and shared some affection, dissecting all that he loved about the paper, then dissected my life, and at least from the past, I shared in this space my kids, my town, my sports, etc. I asked, "You're mine if I do this?" I grabbed my phone and set up for a selfie. He smiled all the way through it. And I asked, similar encounters happened Friday night at the downtown amphitheater, Saturday morning at breakfast. It was echoing as well on Facebook. That's because Facebook in that way created a revenue problem that led to the closure. If you are a consistent reader of this space, the problem of our looming demise is not a new topic. The past several years I've touched on a few times per year in different ways, like explaining a small similar sections and curling the newspaper rather than your ire. We've raised your ire a lot, some of it intentionally. We carried out a watchdog role in the best way. They did very good investigative reporting, incidentally. You were your births, deaths, weddings, etc. Some local newspapers do. My breakfast host Saturday morning said that this will have more impact than the Lordstown closure. That was an auto plant in Lordstown, Ohio. Newspaper closures will be as impactful and more when the banks start closing in 2008. A bailout ensued, and a newsworthy bailout. Well, there won't be no bailout here. This is there's much to sort out from myself, from a community, especially from a law workforce that has aimed to serve. At the bar Friday night, the staff sorted things out. Some of the younger staff said they were here till the end and they would figure out their lives. It has been 150 years and we have 60 days left. Less than 60 now. And that is from the Vindicator, or the Vindy in Youngstown, Ohio. And what we're seeing here is, as we said earlier, a more of a class situation occurring here. And we've seen much of this happening. We'll have to come back to this. I think this is basically the same thing that NPR, excuse me, that NPR echoed in their report there that they were able to bring forward. So the Vindy will continue to cover this. Back to the Washington Post here. Government lawyers affirm administration will pursue additional of adding citizenship question according to a statement to judge. I just wanted to. Justice Department affirmed Friday it's still in pursuing a path for adding a citizenship question into the 2020 census, according to a filing in federal court in Maryland. The filing followed statements earlier today from DJ Trump saying he's thinking of issuing an executive order. That would be just crazy. Government lawyers said in their filing Friday the Department of Justice and Commerce had been instructed to examine whether there is a path forward for the question. If a one is found, they will file a motion in the Supreme Court to try to get the question on the ballot. So that's what they plan to do. Incidentally, this is let me just get this. This is Judge Hazel here. He is a federal judge, a U.S. district judge. Now, usually in these types of matters, you can bypass the district court. Obviously, they're not going to the Court of Appeals. I'm not sure where that Court of Appeals. Anyway, they're not going there. They'll go directly make an application to the Supreme Court if one is found. That's if one is found. And that's a big question right there. There was a 2 p.m. Deadline set. The government, of course, has already started printing the census forms. The Maryland case poses the issue whether the additional citizenship question would violate equal protection guarantees, and whether it is a part of a conspiracy to drive down the count of people of color. Statements from Trump, his acting, Citizenship and Immigration Service Director. This is Ken Continetti. He used to be in Virginia, a right-winger here. Speaking to reporters, anyway, we're just in the dark on this. We can just almost forget it. Now let me just check and see if we can bring up, and we'll close this out here. See if we can bring up from a Real Clear Network. We probably are not going to be able to do it, but we'll see. I don't know what we have for polling. If we don't, we'll get the polling on the week that was. It appears now we will get it. Maybe. Yeah, we are. Well, we only have... Well, we do have the general election. This is Rasmussen. This is a Republican House today. They have... They have Biden at 48 and DJ Trump at 44. I wouldn't pay much attention to that. The other polling here, there's an ABC News, and they're not giving this one out. ABC News, Washington Post poll has Biden at 30, Harris at 13, Bernie Sanders at 19, Warren at 12, the Buttigieg at 4, Beto O'Rourke at 2, Amy Klobuchar at 2. So this is basically the economists had Biden up by only 4. Now this is on Wednesday the 3rd, and Harris at 15, Bernie at, this is a little stranger poll here, at 9. This is YouGov Internet poll. The Morning Consult, I think we've given these before, has the approval rating at 43, and Gallup at 41. That's probably as far as we need to go. Generic ballot, well, this one's the Morning Consult, has the Democrats up by 10 and YouGov up by 9. They were down 3 or 4, so a little interesting there. Anyway, nonetheless, we will see you on the week that was. That comes out on Saturday. We also have Numbers Man. We'll be talking about the jobs and roughly 224,000 jobs created, something around that number. Unemployment at 3.7, if I remember. I don't have my cheat sheet here, but we'll have the other information there. So, a happy weekend to all. And this was a longer weekend. We have to remember it as such. Boston Red from the Jerry Pippin Memorial Broadcast Booth. Good day.